Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the recap show for the Rebel Walk. But before we get into the series recap, I am very honored to be joined by Dr. Chad Altmyer. You guys might recognize the last name. Of course, Luke Altmyer, former quarterback here at Ole Miss, and now on to Illinois, and we wish him all the best, and I know he's going to do well up there, so we're excited to watch him with the Fighting Illini.
We appreciate it.
But Dr. Altmyer, we really appreciate you taking some time with us, and Dr. Altmyer has offered to come on to discuss, in particular, some baseball injuries and things. Obviously, we've had some baseball injuries become very prevalent over the last few years. And with Hunter Elliott now for Ole Miss, obviously he's going to miss 6 to 8 weeks with a UCL injury. And Dr. Altmyer has graciously agreed to give us some of his insight on that. So, Dr. Altmyer, if you would, I'm going to let you have the floor here. You are the expert on this. So I'll kind of let you take it away. And then if we have any questions after that, we'll go from there.
So happy to be on, happy to be joining your audience. And first of all, congratulations to the Rebels for 3 great wins this weekend. Fought along with that, and we're really excited to see them progress this baseball season. But obviously, my expertise comes in the area of sports medicine, having done it for over 20 years and practiced it. And unfortunately, we see injuries at all levels of baseball, football, and basketball, but especially in baseball with the ulnar collateral ligament. And obviously, it's very paramount to this team because of Hunter Elliott's success and the type of athlete he is and competitor he is, and it just great baseball pitcher that he has become. And ulnar collateral ligament injuries are, first of all, very common, not just in college baseball players, but even high school and major league players. In fact, 1/3 of all major league players now have had Tommy John surgery. And people, don't realize how prevalent it's become. But I think the first understand what is it? I mean, most people don't even know what it is. They just know Tommy John. I think the biggest thing is to know that, a ligament, it joins 2 bones, whether it be the ACL in the knee or the Liz Frank in the foot, which we know with Matt Corral. But the ulnar collateral ligament joins the humerus and the ulna on the medial side of the elbow. So with any injury to the ulnar collateral ligament, it affects, obviously it causes pain, but then affects stability to the elbow joint, which then affects mechanics of pitching that little white ball 100 miles an hour. So the thing about the ulnar collateral ligament, everything in the human life doesn't depend on the ulnar collateral ligament except for a couple of main things. The number one is throwing a javelin. And that's where we see it the most is javelin throwers, especially in our track athletes at the pro level and the college level. But again, more prevalent because there's so many more baseball players. So we see you must have a competent ligament to throw a baseball accurately and with velocity. So I think in most people understanding that concept is the beginning of understanding why that ligament gets injured. And the first question people always have is, why is it so more prevalent? Why do we see it more? The first Tommy John was performed in 1974, and it was a miracle surgery. Well, people don't realize we didn't have cell phones in 74, so we continue to evolve in a lot of ways, especially medicine as well as other inventions in our society. But it's become more prevalent, I think, because of the advent of year-round baseball. And little league baseball and travel baseball, and then high school baseball, and then summer baseball, and then fall baseball. I think it becomes prevalent because of fatigue and not enough rest, and also the human's capability of now throwing the baseball 100 miles an hour. What it takes to tear an ulnar collateral ligaments is 35 newtons. Well, every time you throw a baseball, you create more than 35 newtons of pressure across the elbow joint. So it's pretty amazing that the ligament it holds on one throw, and that right. Where an elite, and that's the truth, and it's amazing. The elite athlete, has to use his core, his hips, his abdomen, and the forearm musculature, and the shoulder, and obviously the correct technique, or you would tear your ulnar collateral ligament every time you threw. So that's why it has become more prevalent with the evolution of us being able to throw harder. And then obviously, year-round playing. And I think educating even the little league coaches is where it starts, and even the summer league ball. So that's why I think it's good to have these talks about it. And then the next question, Evie and I talked about when she asked me to come on was, what is the difference? What does a strain mean? Everybody.
Right.
Well, there's three levels to it, okay? And then a strain is our grading systems are just how we characterize injuries as orthopedic surgeons, and then how we treat injuries. So when we grade something, it's mainly a scale, just like anything else. So a grade 1 strain is usually where the ligament is injured. Let's say, for layman's terms, stretched but not torn. A grade 2, there is usually a partial tear. And we're generally speaking not talking about Hunter Elliott. We're just talking about a grading scale. And then grade 3 is a complete tear. Those are the no-brainers. Those are the easy ones for surgeons to make a decision, a complete tear. The hard ones are the grade 1s and grade 2, and how you go about treating them, especially in elite level athletes like SEC starting baseball pitchers. So it becomes a very, very difficult decision when you don't have it just the clarity of a normal ligament or a complete. So you have A, which is normal, Z, which is torn, and then you have everything in between. So it's a spectrum of that ligament, and then deciding how to treat it properly. It's a team approach for sure. Go ahead. Any questions or anything?
Yeah, well, I was just going to say you kind of had a good transition there. So what might go into that decision from your expert point of view? Obviously, I'm sure in Hunter's case, he had to make a decision whether he was going to get surgery or whether he was going to rest and rehab. What might that decision look like with the medical perspective, and what would you guys look for to help someone like him make the right decision?
Sure. I think the first thing is obviously a good history and a good physical exam, obviously. And then in history, meaning, pain on the medial side of the elbow. Is there any numbness or tingling in the finger? How long have you been having symptoms? Did it start with just one pitch, or did it slowly come on and soreness didn't go away? So there's a lot of things you take. And obviously physical exam and then imaging studies, being x-rays and MRIs. And the MRI is obviously a magnetic resonance imaging, which shows the ligament and shows what exactly the ligament looks like in specificity, and it's a very sensitive study as well, to let us see if the ligament is completely torn, if it appears normal, or if it does have some injury to it. And that's where you get that word strain to it, sprain to it. When you have an athlete, whether it be a high school or college or pro pitcher, come in, I think the biggest thing is to in my practice, is to give that athlete a chance to make a decision, especially if you don't have a complete tear. And a lot of times the ligament can heal with rehabilitation. And I think that's what the decision's been made with Hunter Elliott from following in the news and listening to Coach Bianco. Right. What we mean by heal means giving the ligament a chance to recover, and then rehabilitating the arm and the body, and then giving that athlete a trial run at, just like the concussion protocol, there are phases that he must go through to then see if he can get back to that elite level to pitch on a Friday night in the SEC or in Boston Fenway Park. So there's a multiple step process to getting back onto the pitcher's mound once you are diagnosed with an ulnar collateral ligament injury.
Would you think in a young athlete's case in particular, these college kids are anywhere from 18 to 22, in particular when they're freshmen and sophomores, they're 18, 19 years old. How much of a mental process do you think, or mental difficulty is that for them? I mean, obviously making a decision to have a surgery that will be season ending at minimum is certainly not easy. I could not imagine.
Yeah, I think you always want to err in conservatism and giving the athlete a chance to recover, if possible. Obviously, there are cases where that's not even feasible. But the mental aspect I see in really in three different athletes. One is a quarterback. Number two is a baseball pitcher. Number three is a place kicker. So there's so much that goes into an athlete besides just his elbow. And that's where athletes like Hunter Elliott, and we forget these are people that are 19 years old.
Right.
They pitching like heroes, but they're still 19 and 20 years old. So their support system has got to be huge. Then their training staff, their medical professionals, Their pitching coaches, everything goes into that. It's just not a elbow injury, and there's a big mental aspect to it, and every kid is different in that aspect as well. So that is a big hurdle that we work through. But the medical team, when you're treating these athletes, understands that, as well as the trainers at the and people like that. They understand this type of stuff. The trainers that deal with ulnar collateral ligament injuries and throwing athletes. So the mental aspect, and that's why you don't rush them either. You listen to your athlete, you talk to them every day. You really communicate what the rehabilitation are, so they just don't think in a week they're going to be throwing 100 miles an hour again, and give them realistic expectations.
Well, my final question to you, Dr. Altmyer, would be, and you mentioned this earlier, as far as even getting the awareness of this in younger levels, what would you think would be a good system to put in place for even parents or coaches of young pitchers? Obviously, these pitchers are throwing harder and harder these days, and the shoulders are just getting so much stress on them. What's a good idea that you think from a medical perspective of how to prepare young parents and young players for how to best take care of their shoulders?
Well, shoulder and elbow. I think the biggest thing. Elbow, yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, I think the biggest thing is in anything with a young athlete is listening to the right people and asking questions. Don't ever be afraid to ask a question. Any medical professional, especially orthopedic surgeon, whether in Tupelo or Oxford or Memphis or New York, is more than happy to answer any question about a young athlete. So you're never bothering a medical professional. And then number two is you can get some good information online. I mean, James Andrews has some great stuff he's written out of Birmingham with, 30 pitches you rest a day, 40 pitches it's 2 days, 60 is 3 days, 90 it's 4 days. When should you start throwing a curveball? When should you start throwing a changeup? All speed pitches. It's all out there. And then I think having realistic expectations of understanding that you're not going to be drafted in the 7th grade. You're just not. No one ever has. I think Hayden Hurst was the youngest Tommy John in 8th grade. And of course, he was drafted, at the appropriate age, not 8th grade. But I think the biggest thing college baseball and Little League baseball. So the information's out there. It's just asking for it. And I think that would be my best advice. Just ask. It's out there. No one's good. It's not a secret. No one's going to keep it to themselves.
Well, Dr. Altmyer, that is, in my opinion, I'm not a medical expert by any means, but asking for help is never a bad thing. And I think that is just very sage advice for any young person. Don't be afraid to ask for help. I think that's one of the best things you could take away from this whole conversation. Now, I have to ask you on a different note, just while we've got you, just how is Luke doing? Everything going well for him? We really looking forward to watching him perform in Illinois for sure.
He's doing well. I mean, obviously, Oxford is an incredible place to live. So Illinois is a little transition for him, but the football's the same, and he's really enjoying his teammates and his coaching staff, and he's really adjusting well in that aspect.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. We are really excited to watch him play for the Fighting Illini up there. I know he's going to do well, and we're excited to watch him perform up there. It's going to be great to watch him play. We're going to miss him in Oxford for sure. He was a great part of the team. But Dr. Altmyer, we really appreciate you taking the time to come on. Getting that kind of expertise is something we don't get every day. I certainly would not have any of that information. So thank you so much for taking time out of your evening to talk to us about that. We really appreciate it.
Happy to help anytime to help with any injuries. Thank you.
Yes, sir. And that is Dr. Chad Altmyer. Thank you so much again to him. He is going to go about his way. And with that, we will get into the business, the remaining business of the afternoon. And that is to bring on Nick and Chris to chat with the recap about what just happened in Minnesota. Guys, I'm sure you guys were watching with Dr. Altmyer there. He did a great job of explaining some injuries to us. A lot of information that I would never have being not a medical expert. I'm a medical expert in getting the medical treatment, but not giving it by any means. So I'm definitely excited to have him on. But guys, a sweep, 10-2 on the year now. Ole Miss has done what they needed to do, which was go into Minnesota and play in one of the most god-awful setups I think I've ever seen in baseball, and come away with 3 consecutive wins. Before we go into it, you guys know what we do. It's time to talk Cambria Classic right here on the Rebel Walk. All right, guys. Well, again, thanks for joining us. And you guys, this was a fun weekend, getting win number 3 out of 4 against Maryland to start things off. And that might have been the smoothest and most uneventful game of the weekend. Believe it or not, coming into the weekend, we probably thought Maryland was going to be the one that gave us the most trouble. But guys, Chris, we'll start with you. Your thoughts on the weekend as a whole and just kind of what you saw from the team. Overall, very good performance in all 3 games.
Absolutely, Austin. I think offensively is where I was impressed the most, especially today. The 8 RBIs in the first inning with 2 outs really impressed me. So it's Kevin Graham talked about a little bit last year when he was on the radio with DK on a road trip, and he said that the best way to look at it is there's a third of the pie left when you have 2 outs. And so there was a third of the pie left, and we sure got our best out of that third of the pie in the bottom of the first inning.
Yeah, I thought it was.
I lost you there for a second, Chris. It looked like you froze, but we're good. Okay, Nick, go ahead.
Yeah, I thought it was just a good weekend all around. We hit the ball well, pitched it well, played defense, ran the bases. I thought it was just a real complete weekend, and really, I was impressed not only with the hitting, but the pitching. We kind of saw some bullpen struggles earlier in the year, and it was good to see some of those guys get out there and show some confidence and be able to get off the field when we needed it most.
Yeah, absolutely. The young arms, Mike talked about them today. He was really impressed with the young arms out of the bullpen. Braden Jones, my goodness, that kid has got some stuff. I really like what I'm seeing out of him. Mason Morris coming in today in particular, gives up the run, has a couple runners in scoring position, and gets out of that without any more damage. Really excited to see that. And then, of course, Henniger comes in there to shut things down in the 9th, goes 1, 2, 3. Really excited about that. So, yeah, I agree with you both there. Good thing the baseball was impressive because, boy, was the broadcast not. That might have been the worst broadcast I've ever seen just overall. And, look, I feel for I don't know who's running it. I really feel for them. I know it's not their fault necessarily, but they can only do with what they've got. But boy, hopefully they'll up the ante a little bit up there at the Big Ten Network and get things going. When you're playing in a football stadium too, it's never going to look all that great. So there's nothing they can do about that. But today in particular is where I really want to focus offensively because obviously Ole Miss scored 14 runs. None of those with a home run. They did not. There was not a single home run hit by Ole Miss in the game. They got 8 in the first, as Chris mentioned, and then they go on. They actually had the lead cut in half by Nebraska at 1.8-4, and then they just bounced right back from that and started chipping more runs onto it. 2 triples today. TJ McCants legged one out. Peyton Chatinier was flying around the bases to get his. Base running has been a theme this year for Ole Miss. But overall, just really impressive at bats all day long. I'm pretty sure Gonzalez and Groff went walk single. If I remember correctly, it was 3 times. It was walk, Gonzalez, Groff single, moved him to first and second. It may have only been twice. It felt like a theme today in this game. Nick, we'll start with you this time. Offensively in this game in particular, these are the kind of games you like to see. Just the situational hitting and the way they come through with clutch at bats. Your thoughts, particularly in today's game on that?
Yeah, I think like Chris said earlier, the 8 runs in the first inning with 2 outs, that's what you like to see is, not anyone laying down. Like you said, there's still a third of the inning left. And whenever you have guys on base, you don't want to leave them on base, leave them stranded. So, and how you mentioned, we got out 8-0 and then they kind of started creeping back. But the ability for us to put them away in the last 3 innings, scratch a few runs across and kind of put the game out of hand is what you like to see, especially with a team like Nebraska, who is probably one of the better teams that we faced this year. So I just thought, yeah, offensively and all weekend, it was just fun to watch, like you said.
Chris, what about you, sir?
Yeah, I think Groff, obviously, he was named tournament MVP after the game. So really solid performance from him throughout the weekend and today, 3 for 4 RBIs. And then you talked a little bit about Peyton. He was a home run short of the cycle. So really solid from Peyton. And then the pitching, like we said, pitching came through in the end today. So really happy with everything all around today and throughout the weekend.
Yeah, and boy, the stats from today, overall hitting, Ole Miss was 14 of 38 at the plate. That's pretty darn good. That's good enough for 368 as a team. You don't see many games where the team hits that well. I mean, that is not it doesn't 14 to 38. That doesn't that's really good, guys. That's incredible, especially to have that many at bats in a game. That tells you there was a lot of offense going on. As opposed to that, Nebraska was 8 of 33. So if that tells you the difference there, a massive difference there. 2-out hitting, Ole Miss was 7 of 15. Nebraska was 0 of 8 with 2 outs. That right there is the key to the game for me from today is the 2-out hitting. All 8 of the runs in the first inning were scored with 2 outs. So that tells you right there you got to have 2-out situational hitting. The situational hitting last night was a little sketchy. Minnesota made that game close. They really did a great job of turning that around today. So very impressed with just the mental fortitude of this team. To take a game like last night, you're playing a winless team who obviously wants to get their first win. It's essentially a home game. Yes, there's not a big crowd there by any means, but it is in Minnesota. They are hosting the event. They've got the number 4 team there. Everybody's going to play up for top 5 teams, even Minnesota. They did a great job of keeping it close. Ole Miss did a great job. Of course, the home run late in the game sealed the deal for Ole Miss to seal that win. But today to turn that around and really come through with runners on base and the 2-out hitting, to me, that's all it took. And that was the key to the game, in my opinion. I don't know if you guys disagree with that or not, but to me, that was what I looked at the most.
I think you're spot on, Austin. The first put the game away, so to speak. Nebraska did creep back into it, but our offense never really let up. And so we were able to pile on some extra runs toward the end of the game and get really close to a 10-run rule. I did hear the 10-run rule was in effect. I never got official confirmation of that. It's weird how that works these days, whether we're playing a 10-run rule or we are playing a 10-run rule. Conference, obviously, we won't have that problem. I think everything's a 10-run rule. So looking forward to the clarity of the rules, maybe not the fact that pitching comes into play when you get into the conference and everything else like that. So, but I'm looking forward to the clarity of the rules. So not everybody on social media keeps asking, including myself, keeps asking, is this a 10-run rule situation?
Yes. And I assumed it was because I know Florida run-ruled Miami earlier today, and it feels like a pretty common theme that everyone's run rule just is in effect automatically right now. When it gets that out of hand, especially late in the game, at that point, I would imagine everybody's just good to go. And Ole Miss, speaking of runs, they outscored their opponents this weekend 28-12. So they and all 7 of those 12 came against Minnesota. Of course, 5 today, or 28-13. I'm sorry, they gave up 1 run to Maryland. So 28-13, 7 against Minnesota, 5 today against Nebraska, and 1 against Maryland. And boy, Maryland, it looked like Ole Miss was going to have a really good series win over Maryland. You win 2 out of 3 in Oxford, then get another one in Minnesota, and then Maryland loses every game they played this weekend. So it turns out to be, you wonder where Maryland's going to be in the rankings by the time it's all said and done. Still a good win. I'm not taking anything away from it, and they were ranked when Ole Miss played them. Ole Miss can't do anything about what happened after that. But overall, the Terps kind of had a rough series up there in Minnesota, losing to Hawaii. The old Rainbows made a long trip out there and took Maryland out today. Vanderbilt and Minnesota, the only game remaining, if I'm not mistaken, here in the Cambria Classic. That one's for second place. In the series, it doesn't matter. Ole Miss won. They were the only undefeated team for the weekend. Nick, have you got a player of the weekend for us? Because if so, I'm going to cue up your graphic. I know you like it. Sure do. So Nick's going to have his player of the weekend. I'm sure Chris has one as well. Maybe it's the same. We'll find out. It's time for the player of the weekend. Take it away, sir. Who you got? It's tough to pick this weekend.
Yeah. Last weekend it was tough too, but it was come down to the last day. But I got Ethan Groff for this weekend. He had a great weekend. 2 for 5 Friday with the home run, 4 RBIs. Yesterday, 2 for 5 with a stolen base. Today, 3 for 4, a double, 4 RBIs, and another stolen base. So 7 for 15 on the weekend. That's when you hit 500 in any weekend. That's a good weekend. I'm pretty sure the tournament named him the MVP as well. So and y'all mentioned it earlier. I'm pretty sure his 4 RBIs Friday also came with 2 outs. So we talked about it earlier, but and for a guy that has never played in the SEC before, coming and facing, obviously we haven't gotten into SEC play, but it's good to see that he's going to be able to hold his own. At the top of that lineup, when you got Jacob Gonzalez, maybe not this weekend the flashiest guy on the stat sheet, but he gets on base, and that's all you can ask to set that up for that middle of the order to drive guys in. And with 28 runs in a weekend, you really can't complain. And I think Ethan Groff was the might of the punch.
Chris, any disagreement there?
I can't disagree, so to speak, but I'll throw somebody else in the mix just for discussion's sake. I think Jack Doherty did an outstanding job on Friday. The guy's been thrown into the starting rotation. He didn't start the first weekend for Ole Miss. And then to come in and has a career high in innings pitched and a career high in strikeouts on Friday to really set the tone for the weekend, I think was really, really huge for us. So I'm not necessarily disagreeing with Nick whatsoever. I'm just adding another player to the mix of somebody that really impressed me over the weekend.
Yeah, disagree was the wrong word. I should have said any differences or additions, because if I was going to be adding someone, I think you can make a case for Anthony Calarco if you want to throw a different guy in there. Obviously, yesterday, 5 RBIs out of the first 6 runs that were scored in that game came from Calarco. Today, he only had 1 hit, but it was a big one, 2 RBI hit in the first inning that started things going for Ole Miss, coming through big time. Obviously, I can't disagree with Ethan Groff at all. Obviously, the guy hit 500 for the weekend. It's hard to pick somebody else when he hits 500. Jack Doherty, obviously, really bouncing back from his first outing against Maryland to really put on a show this weekend. So a great pick there as well. But Anthony Calarco, I feel like would also be a good option if you're going to look. No bad options this weekend. You can pick from a lot of people.
It's tough to pick with all the talent we got. Every weekend, I'm going to have to pick one guy and kind of feel bad because, like you said, like Chris said, Jack had a great start Friday night, and then Calarco also had a good game yesterday. And it's just tough to pick one guy, But when you have to pick one guy, it's and it's just tough with all the talent we have, and it makes me sad that I can only pick one.
Yeah. You can also make an argument for Calvin Harris and Kemp Alderman.
Yeah,
it's just it was a good weekend for us, both offensively and on the mound. So, there's really no bad choice here.
Yeah, Calvin Harris hit what would have been a 600-foot home run in any normal baseball stadium yesterday that turned into a double in the game last night just because of that big black tarp. But, boy, he got a hold of that ball. Yeah, Calvin Harris, Kemp, Alderman, obviously. Those guys, no one likes facing them. If you've noticed, they really don't do it. They don't put a lot in the strike zone and just hope that they chase. So, if I was a pitcher, I don't think I'd want to see Kemp Alderman at the plate either. I'd be a little nervous facing that big bat. But yes, a variety of potential choices, and all of whom could have been the right pick. There's no wrong answers in this one. But yes, great pick, Ethan Groff, Jack Doherty, Anthony Calarco. All 3 had great weekends this weekend. And with the series sweep, Ole Miss has improved to 5-1 against the Big Ten. So Ole Miss is leading the Big Ten at this point, I feel like. And we've got Purdue coming up next weekend in Oxford. So we're going to have one more Big Ten opponent coming up in Oxford, and Ole Miss will have an opportunity to go 8-1 against the Big Ten. You don't see Big Ten teams very often at Ole Miss. I don't remember the last time we really played this many Big Ten teams, if ever, in a single season. The Cambria Classic certainly threw that kind of in there to get more Big Ten teams in. So I'm excited to see some different teams and see what Ole Miss does. But Ole Miss dominating the old Big Ten so far this season, looking for 3 more when Purdue comes to town. Southern Miss coming up first, so can't overlook them. Rematch of the Super Regional coming up on Tuesday. And it's now time to do what we do every show, and that's to go around the SEC. It tried to play twice. I stopped it. Caught that one. I don't know what happened there. Sorry about that, guys. Graphics cool. We don't want to play it too many times, though. People get tired of it. So right now, there now is only one SEC team remaining undefeated, and that is Alabama. They still haven't lost a game, 12-0. South Carolina did drop 1 to Clemson this weekend, have dropped to 11-1, but they won the series over Clemson. The Gamecocks playing really good baseball this year. They've really bounced back well. Tennessee has done a great job. They're 11-2. But, of course, in the SEC West, Alabama 12-0, LSU 10-1, Auburn 9-1, Ole Miss at 10-2, Arkansas 9-2, A&M 6-4. And it has been a struggle for the team down the road a little bit in Starkville. Mississippi State at 7-5. They salvaged a win today over Cal and Frisco, but lost to Ohio State and Oklahoma. I didn't know teams lost to Oklahoma in baseball. Oh, I'm sorry. I got but in all seriousness, a rough start for them. Still 7-5. I still, in all seriousness, fully expect the Bulldogs to bounce back and have a good season. I just don't foresee that talented lineup staying down. If they can get their pitching figured out, and they have had some pitching trouble as well, just as Ole Miss has had. But I think if they can get that done, I think Mississippi State's still in line for a good year.
I mean, I think that they've just got the talent, and obviously they can coach. So I think it's a matter of time till they get it figured out, as far as I'm concerned.
And Vandy the same way. They're 7-4 over in the SEC East, which is unusual. Usually you're used to seeing Vanderbilt winning a lot of games early, but they've struggled a little bit here early on, but I fully expect them to be back. They will play Minnesota tonight at 7 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Central Time. That's for the final game of the Cambria Classic. Texas A&M will take on Texas Tech at 7 o'clock tonight. Those are the only two SEC games that have not gone final. The only SEC team that lost today was Georgia Tech, or Georgia rather. They lost to Georgia Tech, but that was the only game Georgia Tech won in that series. Georgia did win that series, and they put up a lot of runs doing it, but Georgia Tech did salvage the final game of that one. Florida run-ruled Miami, as I mentioned. How about Jack Caglianon? And I may be completely botching his last name, so I apologize if I am. That dude is just on another level. He was a pitcher, but he's the Shohei Ohtani of college baseball right now is what he is. He is absolutely murdering baseballs and mowing down guys at the plate as well from the pitcher's mound. Certainly in line to be SEC Player of the Year if he keeps this up. And Ole Miss will face his Gators later on in the season. So I'm excited to see how Ole Miss and Florida go as the season progresses because, man, there are some good players all across this league. I'm really excited to see how the SEC plays out this season. So coming up next, guys, will be Tuesday night. Ole Miss will have a rematch of the Super Regional, the first time they will have faced Southern Miss since sweeping them last season in the postseason. Thoughts on that one, guys? It's in Oxford. Southern Miss is never an easy win for Ole Miss. They are really going to play up to the occasion, and you know they're going to have revenge on their mind. Nick, we'll start with you this time. What are you excited about with Southern Miss? We'll touch on that real briefly.
Yeah, I think like you said, I think they've got a little bit of a bad taste in their mouth from this past summer. You know, they couldn't score a run against us down there in Hattiesburg, but there's no doubt in my mind that they're going to come in. And that's just a great program. They're constantly in the tournament, and now in the Sun Belt. But yeah, I'm excited. Anytime you can get, and I won't call it a rivalry, but when you play someone as much as we play them, you could almost consider it a rivalry. But yeah, and I just love the in-state. They're coming to Oxford, and I'm not sure if we go to Hattiesburg this year or not, but I don't think so. But yeah, I'm just excited to see a Tuesday night, where we had last week had Louisiana Tech having some good programs coming into Oxford, and not just any, getting some good games in versus quality opponents.
Yeah, we won't go to Hattiesburg. We will play them in Pearl, however, for
Okay.
the usual series. But Chris, go ahead with your thoughts. I know you and I were in Hattiesburg last year. I know you're looking forward to this game as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a great midweek rivalry with us and Southern Miss. And then when we do the Governor's Cup trophy down in Pearl, or the Governor's Games, I guess it is, down in Pearl. So really looking forward to, like Nick said, some really good quality baseball out of both teams. Anytime you can play your in-state rivals, and I know Mississippi State is our natural rival because of the SEC tie-in. But, having gone down to Hattiesburg and their fans are just as rabid as we are. And, they were super excited to host that Super Regional last year. And, obviously they would have wished it would have gone a different way. And we're really happy it didn't. But their fans are super excited to be playing us. And it's a date that they circle on their calendars throughout the years when we play them. So, it's going to be a great game. It should be a good atmosphere. The weatherman, Mike Bianco, in postgame said that the weather should be really good and encouraged all of Rebel Nation to come out on Saturday with highs in the upper 70s, he said. So
yes.
Good weather for those folks that enjoy the outfield or the reserve seating side of things. So looking forward to having a big crowd on Tuesday night.
Yeah, I'm very excited about that. And Ole Miss leads the all-time series 18-16. It was tied 16 apiece before the Super Regional last year. Ole Miss, with those two wins, has taken a 2-game lead in the series 18-16. So it's very close. Not as many matchups in history as you would expect with the two teams being so local to each other, but that's starting to change. We're really seeing a lot of Ole Miss and Southern Miss, and I expect Southern Miss back in the postseason again this year, and they are certainly looking to rebound and make a run for Omaha this year. And as you mentioned, Nick, a very quality program down there in Hattiesburg, and the rivalry's gotten a little heated here lately as well. So, yeah, certainly hoping for a full turnout of the fans on Tuesday night, because this is one game where the home crowd could really make a difference on a Tuesday night game for Ole Miss coming off of this Minnesota trip. I know they'll be excited to be back in Swayze, but no rest for the weary, taking on a very good Southern Miss team. That game will be at 6:30 p.m. Central Time, obviously, and it will go on the SEC Network Plus. I have not seen an announced starter yet. They typically don't announce those quite this early for the midweek games. We'll keep an eye on that for you as the week progresses. But Ole Miss sweeps Minnesota, or sweeps the Cambria Classic in Minnesota, rather, beating Maryland, Minnesota, and Nebraska. And they are now 10-2 overall on the season, and have a few more games left before conference play starts. We really get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. Thanks again to Dr. Chad Altmyer for joining me and giving us all this great information medically. Thanks to Evie for setting that up. That was certainly not me. So really appreciate her setting that up and getting some good expertise there. And as always, thanks to you guys for bringing your great perspectives and great expertise to Ole Miss baseball. Looking forward to more of it as the season goes. And thanks to all of you for watching. Until next time, hotty toddy. Oh, almost forgot. Dead Soxy. Can't forget about these guys. They're right here on my screen, too. I should have seen them. DeadSoxy.com. Always go use the code RebelWalk for 25% off site-wide anytime. We really appreciate them. Thanks to Jason and all the good folks at Dead Soxy for sponsoring us all season long. Sorry about that, Jason. I almost forgot to mention you, but you know I meant well. Thanks to Dead Soxy as always. DeadSoxy.com. Use the code RebelWalk, 25% off site-wide all season long. All right, guys, thanks so much. We appreciate you joining in for a little bit of a more lengthy show with Dr. Altmyer at the beginning. We'll talk to you next time. Hotty toddy, and have a great rest of your Sunday.
Hi, Toddy, everybody.